In this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, we have a very special guest from AMD here to discuss all of their announcements from CES 2022. The Frank joins us next. Welcome back, my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, to another fine episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks live stream. With me, as always, the incomparable, the effervescent, the incorrigible, I dare say, Marco Chiappetta. How you doing, buddy?
Wow, that was a hell of an intro. I'm doing pretty good.
You're also incorrigible. You're an incorrigible geek.
So they don't know the half of it.
And we've got Chris Getting here with us behind the knobs and dials. Say hello, Chris.
How's it going?
Yeah, there he is. That's our engineer, at least for today, Chris. And he's always making us sound and look as good as we possibly can. But a guy that looks good pretty much all the time, last I checked, is this guy that joined us today from AMD, Frank Azor. Welcome to the live stream.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I was hoping I'd get like an effervescent intro like you gave Marco. I just got a good looking one, but I prefer the effervescent one.
You do. I was just thinking the Frank, which is kind of like the Mac, but it's a cooler version of that, the Frank.
If you say so, buddy.
Dave knows I have a really fragile ego, so he has to build me up.
Yeah, that's it. It's all about keeping Marco in a happy place. Yeah, go ahead, bud.
The Frank, I guess, is better than Frank the Tank, which has been a known name. So I'll take that instead.
You've kept it svelte during the COVID shut-ins. Yeah, I haven't seen any extra lubs drop on you.
Yeah, it took a pandemic to shut me up. Yeah, that's for sure.
So how are things, my friend? It's been a while since we've had you on the stream. You've graced our presence here a number of times, but it's been a while. How's things going for you in general?
Great. Things are going really well, thankfully. We had our major keynote launch yesterday, which puts that chapter of months and months of preparation and work and all the nerves going into producing that to rest, and very happy with the response of that. So now we get maybe a week or so of a little bit of a downtime before we have to plan the next one. And then in between all of that, develop everything that we're trying to launch, of course, which is a ton of fun. But overall, pretty good. I was supposed to be at CES this week, but that kind of fell apart. But other than that, I mean, no complaints. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, pretty well, and kind of very much in the same mode as you. Scrambling to keep our breath with all the sights and sounds and happenings of CES, and thanks to you folks for keeping it busy for us, but also a little bit of a tap dance and shuffle to adapt to what we had plans to be at the show as well, and we pulled up the reins on those, so went to plan B, as they say.
Yeah, you definitely have to have two plans nowadays, that's for sure. We got close to going to Computex actually, and then that got shuttered with Delta, and then we were a week away from CES, and now that got shuttered. I think you got to have a plan B nowadays. There's just no choice.
Yeah. I had plans to be there, and I canceled them early when I heard a couple of early ones were pulling out, and I was hearing about the spike. And then it was like a bunch of others followed suit, and you folks pulled out, and I was like, okay, that was the right decision, even though I would have rather have spent some time with you in the real.
Well, yeah, I was really looking forward to it. I'm not a huge fan of CES because it's typically so busy, hundreds of thousands of people waiting for cabs and cars and restaurants and everything. But that's the negative side of it. I mean, the positive side is being able to see everybody and catch up and hang out and brainstorm and just, geek out on all the cool products. So I was looking forward to that, especially after last year being canceled. But it is what it is. We'll cross our fingers for next year.
You do the best you can, and that's all you can do, right? And you guys are firing. I think last year at this time at CES, right, Marco? We were sort of flabbergasted at the number of announcements that AMD stepped forward with and all that they launched. And this year was kind of more of the same, right, buddy?
Yeah, man, tons of stuff this year. I mean, you guys have a bunch of new mobile parts, not just new Ryzens, but new mobile GPUs, plus new software and features on the mobile side. Plus, we saw that new, Ryzen with 3D V cache, some updates on Zen 4 and AM5, just tons of stuff. We could talk for hours if we wanted to, pick through all of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to be proud of. The teams have been pretty busy. I think we brought our entire arsenal to the show. And what's really cool is we keep bringing not just awesome CPU announcements and not just mobile and desktop CPU announcements, but the last couple of launches, we've been bringing great graphics, desktop and mobile announcements as well. And then all the software and the smart technologies in between. So we're coming to the launches and we're making a really big effort to do so with a full kind of end-to-end portfolio from CPU all the way down to software features and with graphics in between, and the advantage solutions in between as well, to give folks kind of the complete picture of everything we're working on here.
Yeah, all the teams firing: hardware, software, graphics, and CPUs. I mean, really just a plethora of things to step through, and we'll try and unpack the bulk of it and try not to stump you too much, because one of the things that occurs to me is, as chief gaming architect, that's your title at AMD, you have to be kind of expert on all this stuff, and all of this stuff relates to gaming.
Yeah, I can tell you I'm not the expert on, I'm more the jack of all trades kind of person, not the expert. So let me not set that bar, but I do have to, be involved in most of the conversations and stay abreast of everything going on, because what my role primarily consists of is putting everything we're working on together into these gaming solutions that we call the advantage solutions. So knowing what's going on with CPU, what's going on with graphics, what's going on with all the software behind CPU and graphics, everything going on with our driver and our Adrenaline software package and all the other technologies that we've got going on, not just now, but also over the next 4 to 5 years. It's a lot. So every day it's like this incredible amount of information that's coming at me. But it's pretty awesome, because when I was in the OEM world, everything that was coming at me was basically as a customer, and it was already well thought out. And here's what we developed for you to go put into your system. And in this role, and with AMD creating this role and me serving in it with my team, we're not just listening to what's coming out of the teams, but we have an opportunity to feed back into them. Like, hey, think about maybe changing this, or we should modify this, or this is really important to gamers and end users, not just from a CPU or an individual GPU perspective, but from a complete solution perspective. So it really kind of ties out the entire thinking, if you will, so that any one of the teams isn't myopically focused on just how do I build the best CPU, how do I build the best GPU. We're giving perspective now as to how are we building a complete solution, because you can't use a CPU by itself. You can't use a GPU by itself. Everything that's connected to it, the whole solution, the whole ecosystem, the whole desktop, the whole laptop is essential to the computing experience. So I think AMD is really ahead on that. And it's a pretty awesome role. And we've made a lot of traction in improving the complete computing experience because of it.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point. I think folks might not completely understand about your role in the company. We see you as sort of a public-facing figure. You're spending time with us here. You talk with the press and analysts, but you also, a good chunk of your time is spent in the productization, sort of vision side with your partners to help roll out better products.
Yeah, actually. I guess you could say that I do a lot of the PR talking, because I'm the one of the few people crazy enough to do it, but it's not actually my primary role. My day job is designing and defining all the smart technologies that you've seen us launch up to now. So I have the product management team that works with our engineering teams to go off and develop all of those technologies, and all those technologies are CPU and GPU based technologies. So we have to work very closely with both of those teams. And then a lot of those technologies are also very software dependent. So we work very closely with the software team. And then Another part of the job is how do we take those technologies and implement them into solutions. Desktops and notebooks is what we call, or desktops and laptops is basically how we categorize solutions. And how do we integrate everything, our CPUs, our GPUs, our software, and our smart technologies with all the built to game aspects of that we've designed into our design framework that we call Advantage. How do we make sure that we work with these partners to build a great set of laptops and desktops that represent AMD the way we want AMD to be represented in market? And then the third piece of the job is I also oversee the team that manages our Adrenaline drivers. So if you've seen a lot of changes, a lot of new features to our formerly known as Radeon software, now we call it the Adrenaline software driver and package. My team and I own all the definition and roadmap for that. And I also run all gaming marketing. So I have a very kind of broad scoped role. And then in between all of that, I get to come on and talk to you guys and share some of the great work that we're doing. So not to say that I'm busy. I'm not trying to brag about how busy, but some folks wonder, like, am I just a spokesperson for the company? But no, that's not my role.
Get your hands dirty as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's what I love about it. I get to create some of this stuff and then come tell you guys about it. I don't know if I've said it to you guys before, but the two best days of the job are the day you conceive the technology, the product, the solution, the idea, and then the day that you get to go launch it. Everything in between is a ton of hard work. So being able to do both of those things with the technology role and then all the way downstream to the marketing role, it's a great job. Having a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Sounds like it. Absolutely. Well, we have a lot to dig into, so let's go ahead and launch away on some questions for you and cover some of the topics. Marco, I know you've got a bunch of stuff lined up. By the way, folks, please fire away questions in the chat as they may come up in your brains. We would love to field your questions so that Frank can interact with the audience directly. But we've got Marco Chiappetta here, who is AKA Big Wop. And if anybody gets out of line, he's kind of our resident bouncer. He'll show you the exit, right, buddy?
Yeah, I don't know, not anymore. I kind of lost my fitness mojo, and I don't have the stamina to take care of the crowds anymore. But we'll try to turn that around this year.
Yeah.
But so Frank, there was so much stuff that you guys launched, so we should probably just kick things off, and we'll go where the conversation takes us. I think that one of the first interesting topics to talk about has got to be the Ryzen 6000 series.
Now, drop a link in.
You guys mentioned that the SoCs are using RDNA 2 graphics, so existing RDNA 2 graphics architecture, and an update to Zen 3, so Zen 3 Plus on the CPU side, but it's not like a ground up redesigned new architectures. But you managed to incorporate tons of power saving features and increase performance, and incorporate some new tech as well. Can you just talk about the Ryzen 6000 series and how you guys, what type of changes were made to enable the increased performance and power savings, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we were defining the Ryzen 6000 series, we've always had a focus on power efficiency. And the 5000 series has been an incredibly power efficient processor, getting battery life of over 20 hours in some cases, and certain workloads and certain systems and everything, of course. But as we were planning this generation, we knew we were going to be going into a market where we were going to be facing competition that was going to be using multiple types of different cores, kind of low performance, hyper efficient cores, and then high performance, less efficient cores. And as we faced that decision, we decided to focus on the Zen 3 core and optimize it as much as we really possibly. It's always still more optimization, but as much as we can conceive at the time to optimize it into the Zen 3 Plus core so that we could effectively compete against that architecture with a single type of core that could scale end to end, instead of having to pump in all these multiple types of cores into the processor, which is a little bit confusing now because you look at some core counts and it says, 12 core and 14 core. And if you're not well educated about the differences in the cores, you would think that all cores were created equal, and they're not. They're very, very different cores in most cases. So that focus and that concentration on saying, hey, we've got a remarkable Zen 3 architecture, and we see opportunity in it to make it better. And just putting that focus in making it better is one of the things that gave us some of the outputs that came out of that work. So there's over 50 new or enhanced power management features that we've put into and that we've hard coded into the new Zen 3 Plus core as compared to what we had with Zen 3. There's a new and improved adaptive power management framework. So we've implemented more sensors around the laptops, the complete solution around the whole laptop, the motherboard, and so on. And we're responding to the temperature and the performance requirements of the complete solution with the processor itself, more so than we did with the original Zen 3. And the other thing that's also given us a big benefit is we've moved to 6 nanometer, right? So we were on 7 nanometer before, and we moved to 6 nanometer. And those investments are huge. They're very expensive anytime you move to a new node. But the reason we do it is to get more performance, especially more performance per watt. And even though Zen 3 Plus versus Zen 3 are very similar from a core architecture perspective, they're very different in everything else that's wrapped around them. Like I talked about, the power management features, the adaptive power framework, and then the fact that we moved down to the 6 nanometer node. So it's a combination of all of those things working together to give us the performance uplift that we're seeing, and then the power efficiency that we're seeing. And we're able to accomplish it with a single core that can scale end to end versus having to do this hybrid architecture of a efficient core and a performance core, which we're very, very happy that we've been able to accomplish this as efficiently and as effectively as we have with Zen 3 and Zen 3 Plus. It just goes to prove just how superior of an architecture it actually is.
Yeah, question on the power side of things, Marco. And I just want to hop in here real quick. AI and I guess machine learning are sort of buzzwords that are thrown around today, and not necessarily always the reality. It's an algorithm in the background. How much of that is involved in the new architecture for things like intelligent power management? Did you folks work on some advanced algorithm and on the software side of things, or maybe even some intelligent engines internally to try and enable better power efficiency?
Honestly, the term is used a little bit loosely nowadays, the term AI. And there's a lot of companies that are using it as a marketing term more so than a truly credible term. Right. What I can tell you is there's an enormous amount of algorithm work that's in the processor and in our software and our drivers, our firmware, our BIOSes, everything, to give us the kind of performance attributes that we're getting today. There are some elements of AI in the system, you could say, in that the processor is learning from the adaptive power framework, that it's observing what's going on in the system, and it's reacting and responding to it. But that's a really loose kind of way of trying to justify that you have true AI in the way that we think about it, like Rise of the Machines AI. So I'm not going to come out and say, absolutely, we have this incredible AI engine that's doing all this incredible work inside the processor. I think that would be misleading. And I think it's misleading by anybody out there who's claiming that in their processors today.
Got that. Yeah, we do have some folks out there, chip manufacturers that will remain nameless that do throw that around a little bit too liberally. But appreciate the candor there. Marco, I'm sorry. Go ahead, jump in there. I was on a tangent.
It was a good segue as Frank was talking about the tweaks made to the SoC, because also yesterday you guys announced SmartShift Max. I think I got that correct, and SmartShift Eco. Now we knew about SmartShift, from previous launches, and you already had Smart Access Memory, but now we have some new related features here as it relates to notebooks, both with and without discrete graphics. So you have SmartShift Max and SmartShift Eco. Can you talk about how that works into the new platform?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and give you guys the information that we didn't already share in the launch event, right? Supplemental. So if you compare SmartShift and SmartShift Max, they're both TDP or thermal design power shifting technologies. What they do is they basically shift power from the CPU over to the GPU and vice versa, depending on what the workload or the game is that you're running. In some cases, certain workloads, especially non-gaming workloads like 3D content creation and so on, they need more CPU performance. And then games need more GPU performance. So the original SmartShift, it was, designed so that when a workload was occurring that wasn't a game, we would give all the TDP we possibly could over to the CPU. And then vice versa, when a game was running, we'd give all the TDP we possibly could over to the GPU. And when you do that, you get significant boosts in performance, 10, 15% in some cases. What we learned in SmartShift is that there was opportunity to get a little bit smarter, if you will, around how we shift that power. And that's how we created SmartShift Max. You could basically consider it to be SmartShift 2.0, if you will. But the way it differs from the original SmartShift is instead of just shifting the TDP, the power over to the CPU or shifting it to the GPU, almost blindly, depending on what the workload is that you were doing, we're getting we've become a lot smarter about shifting that TDP over. So there may be situations where if you shift the TDP over to the CPU, the application you're running actually may need some GPU performance, because a lot of applications today aren't exclusively CPU or exclusively GPU driven workloads. The original SmartShift was kind of ignorant to that, and the new SmartShift Max is conscious of the performance needs that the CPU may have or the GPU may have post a shift occurring. And this all happens in milliseconds, by the way. And what it does is it kind of balances itself a little bit better, so that instead of maybe being an 80-20 in one favor or the other, kind of guardrail to guardrail, depending on the workload and where it's benefiting, it'll better balance itself to maybe be a 73, 27 kind of ratio, something like that. And it'll constantly be shifting within those very, very finite parameters of TDP. And then SmartShift, and then the benefits of that we shared at the launch event are some applications that weren't seeing any uplift from the original SmartShift. We're seeing significant uplift. Like these are two examples: Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Tom Clancy's The Division 2. And then some of the applications that we're seeing uplift from SmartShift, like Stranger Brigade and Godfall. These are good examples of us doing it ignorantly. We are just giving the GPU everything we had to offer, but maybe sacrificing some of that CPU performance. And that's what was costing us that delta between the 6% and the 13% that you see here, and the 10% and the 13%. So getting smarter and becoming bilaterally aware of the CPU and GPU's needs, and then shifting appropriately. That's where we're seeing even better uplift than what we saw with the original SmartShift. Now shifting to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, great explanation. And I think, there are a lot of folks wondering, and we're looking at these great gains, by the way, Frank. And a lot of folks wondering, okay, how are we getting there? Yes, we know it's smarter, but how is it smarter? So appreciate that. That was great detail.
Yeah. It's when you're trying to compress in a keynote with so many products into 40 minutes, we start with this huge explanation, and then it's like a 3-hour-long keynote, and then we got to start pulling a bunch of stuff out. Unfortunately, that stuff doesn't get to make its way into that. But that's why we come here and talk to you guys. And then SmartShift Eco, you had also asked about that, Marco. SmartShift Eco, it shares the name SmartShift, but it's really not a TDP. You could argue this, but it's very different than SmartShift and SmartShift Max, in that we're not really shifting TDP between the CPU and the GPU. It's really, SmartShift Eco is just a convenience feature. It's not a huge revolutionary feature by any means, but because the Ryzen 6000 series APUs, as we call them, right, CPU with really powerful integrated graphics in them, because they have the RDNA2 graphics in there, and because it works so well with FSR, the Fidelity Effect Super Resolution technology, and then what we introduced, RSR, Radeon Super Resolution, which also works with the Ryzen 6000 series, The truth is, and you saw some of the benchmarks if you saw the launch event, Jason Banta went through some of them. There's some pretty respectable frame rates you can get out of games just running on the Ryzen 6000 series processor. So we developed this feature so that you can decide, it's entirely optional and it doesn't come default on, I don't believe. You can decide if it makes sense for you when you're not plugged in, when your laptop is not plugged into a wall outlet, it'll automatically run games on the integrated graphics of the Ryzen 6000 series. And you can lower your resolution or you can lower your game settings if you need to. Or in some cases, you may go from 200 frames per second down to 70 or 80 frames per second or 60. And you turn on FSR or something like that. And then when you plug in, the games will automatically execute on the discrete graphics. So it's just a way that, if you're like a heavy commuter with your gaming laptop, and maybe you take a train to go to work or to go to school, or during your lunch at school, you'd like to maybe get an hour or so of gameplay in if you could, and there's not an outlet nearby. And this is like something that is your scenario of life and how you use your gaming laptop. This is a convenience feature that you can take advantage of. So you can go from maybe a few minutes of gameplay trying to run your discrete graphics on battery. I mean, you can kind of get like 30 minutes, maybe 40 or 50 minutes typically if you're trying to run a game on discrete graphics, especially on the higher end GPUs, to over an hour on the Ryzen APU, because a lot of these gaming laptops have really beefy batteries, 76 watt hour, in some cases 95, 99 watt hour batteries. So you put that on a Ryzen APU that maybe at max TDP is running at, let's say, 25 watts or 15 watts, and you can get hours of gameplay out of your system. It's not exactly proportionate because you're consuming power with other things like the LCD and other things. So don't exactly do the division and say, oh, you can get 3 hours of battery life. It's not that simple, but you can definitely go from minutes on discrete graphics to over an hour in most scenarios when you run the game using SmartShift Eco on your APU's graphics. So it's a convenience feature. We think more and more folks are going to make use of it, especially because of the RDNA graphics in Ryzen 6000. So that's what SmartShift Eco is.
Makes sense.
Gotcha.
Here's
Now,
a good
before-
question. I'll figure I'll toss that in there. Sorry, Marco. Just a good, straightforward question here from Major of the Year. Does SmartShift Max ramp up and down fan speed before allocating power?
SmartShift Max is controlling the CPU and the GPU, and it's hard coded into each of them. So what we're doing is the fans are responding to the TDP of the system. Right. And that's pretty much how most, if not all, systems are designed. So as the temperature starts to rise very, very quickly, the sensors in the processor and in the overall on the motherboard of the system are telling the BIOS, hey, you need to bump up the fan speed in order to bring down the temperature. And if you have your fan tables set correctly and your hysteresis and everything, that should happen smoothly and it should come down smoothly. And that's one of the things that we work on with our OEM partners as part of the Advantage design framework is we look at those fan tables, that hysteresis, and we make sure that all the fans are responding appropriately to SmartShift and to the TDP rises and falls of the CPU and the GPU. But more importantly, that it's doing it with the best customer experience possible. So, I've owned systems in the past or have evaluated systems where it's like they have 3 fan steppings and it's like you go from low to medium to high, and it goes from can't hear it to it's annoying to, oh my goodness, this thing sounds horrible and it sounds like a jet taking off. And then I've also run into systems where there's no hysteresis, where it never comes off the high fan mode after you went to a high TDP environment. So what we do in Advantage is we work with our partners to make sure that their fan tables and their hysteresis is configured appropriately so they get a nice slow ramp up and that the fans are always in tune with the TDP of the system, and you get a nice slow ramp down. And if there's any point in between that where your fans can hover and they don't need to be at max or they don't need to be all the way low, we look at the least, the least distracting way to possibly deliver those TDP levels. In other words, the lowest fan speed we can possibly give you to sustain those TDP levels that you're drawing from the system at that time, so that you can perform but not have a jet engine next to you while you're doing so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and some folks may remember, old school Alienwares were really, really loud. So we learned a lot, and we have a lot of experience in this area now.
Got it. Go ahead, Marco. I know you're going to dive in there or something.
So, well, I wanted to add, there's a question that came in the chat, and we have to acknowledge Frank probably can't fully answer this, but I want to ask anyway. So the Vault was asking, will the 6000 series eventually come to desktops? And if yes, will it be AM4 or AM5? And I think the crux of the question is, you have APUs now, the 5600G and 5700G on socket AM4 that still use Vega graphics. This 6000 series architecture is newer across the board. Is there a possibility of that architecture making its way to desktop APUs?
What's the answer I'm supposed to give? We're not ready to announce any potential or otherwise products here today. I can't say.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry. I mean, I think we revealed a lot about AM5 at the show. We talked a lot about Zen 4, but there's details that we have to save for the future. So I can't share right now. I'm sorry.
Understood.
No worries,
right,
Frank. We'll walk up to that line and you can just tell us not to cross it. All good.
So just going back to SmartShift, SmartShift Eco, you also announced Smart Access graphics. And if I understand that correctly, it's essentially allowing the discrete GPU and the integrated GPU to have direct connections to the display outputs, and it will switch intelligently between the two. Do you need to have this feature to also have SmartShift Eco?
No.
Or are they exclusive? Okay.
No, you don't have to. They're all kind of mutually exclusive, I think. Yeah, all the smart features right now are mutually exclusive. On the contrary, when you have all the features in the system, we have to solve a bunch of interoperability challenges. So it's actually more challenging for us when you have everything in the machine. But that's part of what we have to solve for. So Smart Access graphics is exactly what you said, Marco. There's different benefits to the discrete graphics being directly connected to the display in a notebook, or the APU being directly connected to the display. When you have a gaming notebook and the APU is directly connected to the display, what you do is you route the discrete graphics, because you got to get that display output to the display. You typically route it through the integrated graphics, and then the integrated graphics displays it out to the actual display. That routing, you have to copy frames basically from the discrete graphics to the integrated graphics, and the integrated graphics can output them to the display. That copying of frames introduces a latency, and that latency can impact, it does impact performance in most games by double digits. It's a very significant. We showed 15% average. The upper end of that average, we've seen as high as 25% performance impact when you route discrete graphics through integrated. The benefit to doing it, though, is you can shut off the discrete graphics and you can get significantly better battery life when you're not running a game. That's the reason why we implement these hybrid graphics implementations. And our competitors have these hybrid graphics implementations as well. They market them under different brand names. What we did with Smart Access graphics is we put a MUX switch in between the connection of the discrete graphics and the display, and the integrated graphics and the display. And what we're allowing that MUX to do is control which one of those two chips is displaying to the display at any given time. And then what we do is, through software, we recognize if this is a non-DGPU intensive workload, and then we basically MUX switch over to the integrated graphics. And if it's a DGPU intensive workload, a discrete graphics intensive workload, we MUX switch over to the discrete graphics. And what that does is it gives you the best of both worlds. You get the battery benefits of having the integrated graphics directly connected to the display, and you get the performance benefits of having the discrete graphics directly connected to the display. So we finally have achieved the best of both worlds, and not having to do a reboot. You don't have to press a function key. You don't have to do any of that complexity. It's fairly seamless and automatic to the gamer.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool. There was a question that came in. I will toss it up on the page. This is a fairly simple one on the driver's side. The chat asks, Radeon RGB utility, where'd it go? from the drivers. If you could help. I don't know personally. Have you played with that, Marco? I'm not familiar with it myself.
I haven't played with it since the launch, and I haven't looked. I was just poking around on the site trying to find it while Frank was chatting, and I didn't see it. So if you have any news on that, Frank, it'd be great. Otherwise, we can follow up later, Chad. We'll put a comment up on the video.
I'm looking at my software right now on my system, and I'm trying to find it. And I'm sorry about that. I will immediately get on that. We will fix that. It was not removed intentionally, to my knowledge. So we'll add that back in there. Let me just take a note here.
Cool. There you go. Little direct feedback is always helpful. Cool. Good stuff. You want to stay on this, Marco? You want to move on to some CPU stuff?
We should probably move on because we're going to run out of time, and there's so much stuff we need to cover. Let's Frank, let's talk about the discrete graphics for a sec. Before I know the 3D Vcache and the 5800 X3D is going to be very popular, but both AMD and NVIDIA, you guys both launched some announced mainstream GPUs yesterday. You have the Radeon RX 6500 XT was announced. NVIDIA had the GTX 3050. And, you guys are both targeting 1080p gamers, more affordable price points. But one of the overarching big feature differences is you guys targeted 4 gigs of memory and NVIDIA put 8. And then there was some chatter about how that may help availability of the Radeon because it's going to make the card much less attractive to miners. Can you just riff on that, and then maybe if you can give some expectations on availability for the 6500 XT?
Yeah, it's always dangerous when I talk about graphics card availability.
Yeah, I know, but it was one of the first questions.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Oh man,
it's a line to walk.
Let's see how forgiving the audience can be.
I'll give you $10 if you answer this question.
Oh, yeah.
I had to. I'm sorry.
God, Jesus.
It cost me a lot more than $10.
I know.
I ended up sending him the 6800, but that's a conversation for another day. Yeah. So look, our primary goal with the 6500 XT was to try and build the most accessible, which is a nice word for affordable, desktop GPU we could with strong 1080p performance. And, there's a lot of benefits that come with having modern GPU technologies to deliver that kind of performance. Not only are games becoming more intensive, but a lot of the new technologies that we offer are optimized for the new GPUs, and they run a lot better and more efficiently on the new GPUs. Things like Fidelity FX Super Resolution, Radeon Boost, anti-lag, all these different technologies. So our goal was to get to a disruptive price point at a time when GPUs are very expensive. And every major GPU that's come out in the last year or two has been, I think, over $300, right? Or at least $299 and above. So our goal was to try and disrupt the market. And we set the goal of $199 to be able to do that. And memory prices have skyrocketed, very honestly. And you can't get to, let me not say it definitively. It's extremely challenging, if not impossible, to get to $199 in today's market with an 8 gigabyte graphics card. Maybe somebody will prove me wrong. I'm not taking any bets on that, but it's extremely challenging to get there. And in order for us to design a card that would perform very well with all these modern technologies and achieve that price point, and for our partners to be motivated to build a lot of them, because we want them to build a lot of them. We did the performance testing, 4 gigs versus 8 gigs. We factor in things like FSR and RSR, Radeon Super Resolution, because keep in mind, we know what we're developing in tandem with these cards. And the truth is with those technologies supplementing the performance of the card, and the fact that we're not going after 4K or 1440p gaming here, we're going after 1080p medium to high settings. We think that was the right decision. We think that going with 4 gigs is the right decision. It's also a huge, how'd you say it? It's very unattractive to have 4 gigabytes if you're a crypto miner. So there's a benefit, a significant benefit that going with 4 gigabytes, we think is going to give the availability of our GPU in market as compared to every other option that's pretty much out there in market right now. We'll see if that materializes, but we're planning to come to market with a strong amount of supply. We think we've done everything right. We think we hit the right price point. We think that people are going to be very pleased with the performance when they see the real performance of the card versus the perceived performance because of the 4 gigabytes. And when you supplement it with FSR and RSR, and you will hopefully be able to find it in market, I'm optimistic that people will appreciate the decisions that we made here. And I would say I'm very confident in the decisions that we made. But I learn something new in this market every day, so we'll see what happens. I will also say, don't assume that 4 gigabytes will be the only graphics memory configuration that will ever exist of the 6500 XT.
Oh, there you go. That's good insight there for folks. And actually, so totally understand the profit margin and hitting price points for the consumer. But what you're saying for sure as well is that 4 gigs versus 8 gigs and the less attractive to miners was actually part of the decision-making process.
It wasn't
a gate, but it was part of the discussion.
It was definitely part of the decision process. I think up to now, most, if not all, attempts to try and do things to ward off miners hasn't succeeded that much. These software hacks and things have been very quickly and easily overcome. We're all trying to figure it out. This is an attempt. Let's see if it works out. This is a hard-coded thing. This is like almost arguably a limitation. You really can't even, I don't even think you can reasonably mine Ether with 4 gigabytes of memory. So if it works out and we're right, then this could actually end up being the perfect gamer and gamer only graphics card. It's very affordable. It's got all modern technologies. It's got a memory config that hopefully miners will find unappealing. And it's very small form factor in its shape and very aggressively priced. And we hope that there'll be a lot of them on shelf. So every graphics card has been hated in the last 2 years. I'm hoping that we nailed this one and that people will love us for it. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
There you go. Good stuff.
So you mentioned Radeon Super Resolution, and there's a ton of nuance here that we should probably talk about before we move on to AM4 and the 5800 X3D. So if I'm understanding Radeon Super Resolution correctly, it's implemented at the driver level. In game, you would drop your resolution in game, and then the driver basically takes over from there and uses your upscaling technology to improve image quality at some higher resolution. Did I absorb that properly? That was correct?
That's right.
So does it just work universally at the driver level, or are there only certain APIs that it works for? Can you just give some extra color on RSR?
Sure. Oh man, the API question is good. I think it's DX12 and Vulkan. I'm not sure if it goes further than DX12 and Vulkan right now. I'd have to get back to you guys on that one. But the simple answer is if FSR works on the API, then RSR works on it. Look, the best upscaling implementation is still going to be FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, because and you're going to continue to see us grow our game count, by the way. We just announced 70 titles are either in market or coming by the first half of this year. So 70 titles. We just announced this in June. It's remarkable. That's basically like 10 titles a month that we've added to the portfolio. It's definitely been, I think, one of the fastest upscaling technologies adopted so far. The reason FSR is superior is because we put FSR in the rendering pipeline, and we put it exactly in the rendering pipeline where everything you want upscaled is upscaled and everything you don't want upscaled is not upscaled. Things like especially the HUD and things that are in the foreground. So there may be some games where Radeon Super Resolution, because it's at the end of the rendering pipeline, it just upscales everything. You may get some things that are upscaled that don't look great. We haven't run into this yet, but there may be some older games and things that in the foreground is maybe small text or the way that the text is designed. Maybe we don't do a great job upscaling it. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. But FSR is, let's just say, a much more precise implementation in kind of in the middle of the rendering pipeline. RSR is more of a brute force upscaler at the end of the rendering pipeline. So it's going to work very well. We're very happy with it. It's very simple to enable too. Just like you said, Marco, you go into the driver, you turn it on, and then you just lower the resolution of your game to something other than your native, and then it'll output the game at your native resolution. And you can choose what resolution you want that to be. The further you go from native, the worse the quality will be, just like FSR. The closer you get to native, the better the quality will be. We have more information to upscale. But this is one of the big benefits of us using a spatial-based upscaler versus a temporal-based upscaler or a machine learning-based upscaler, like some of the other solutions that are out there. Those are great. I'm not putting them down by any means. But what we're just trying to do is extract the maximum value that we can out of what spatial's benefits are. And that is that we don't need prior frame information to be able to output any of the or to be able to do the upscaling. We do it on the fly, frame by frame, and that affords us the ability to do what we're doing with Radeon Super Resolution.
Got it.
Gotcha.
So you answered some of my other questions about output resolution, et cetera. So that's great. Very cool.
Good.
We should.
I'm going to toss one in there,
Oh,
Marco.
go ahead.
Real quick. Click back to smart access memory. I think the answer to this one is yes. Can it work over USB-C and HDMI connections?
Yes.
Okay. That was just wanted to get that in there. All right.
Did we miss any questions going back?
That's why I'm scrolling back. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say to everybody watching, we're inside StreamYard, so we get comments from every platform into one chat thing, so stuff flies by fairly quickly. So if we miss something relevant, we're not ignoring you. Ask again. Okay, Frank just touched
there. Well, he touched on this already, and needs to get back to us on that question.
Okay. Yeah, it's let me see here.
We don't want to.
Yeah, I have to get back to you. I know it's Vulkan and DX12. I can't remember right now the other APIs that we support, but it's the same. RSR is based on FSR, so it's the same. It's going to be the same APIs that FSR supports.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we're getting close, so we should move on to the big boy.
The big boy.
Ryzen.
Yeah.
Oh no, we're out of time. I'm saved by the bell.
So Ryzen
5800X 3D.
Yeah, Ryzen 7 5800X 3D. This is the first, and as far as you guys have announced, the only Ryzen with the integrated 3D V cache that Dr. Su has been showing off for a little while. Looks like a monster CPU. You guys are claiming gaming leadership with this chip. The main question is that we've gotten from lots of readers, and we've had internal discussion is why the 5800X 8-core level was chosen to implement this versus one of your higher end SKUs. Since it's like really a performance oriented feature, why not put it on your enthusiast SKU with more cores? Can you just give us some information on the thought process that went into bringing this one to market?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. There aren't many games, if any, that are going to get much more uplift out of an 8-core processor. And the 5800 is really like the ideal gaming processor of all of them, really. I mean, when you move up the stack, you're certainly getting more cores, and it's allowing you to do more with the processor. You can be doing encoding, decoding, you can be streaming, you can be running a lot of things in the background as you're gaming, but there are very few games, if any, that are going to take advantage of more than 4 or 8 cores at a given time. And by putting it on a package like the 5800, it allows us to give you more performance per core of those 8 cores, because we're able to focus the technology on those 8 cores, and we have a TDP limit that we have to fit within. So that's able to give us, overall better performance per every one of those cores. And, very honestly, there's a price factor to it as well. The Vcache is an expensive technology, and it's pretty awesome. It's a technology that today is benefiting first and foremost games and gamers. So we felt we really wanted to put it on the best gaming processor, truly gaming processor that we had, and that's the 5800. So when you see it come to market, it'll be at something that folks will be able to find accessible to them, and they're going to be getting a technology that'll benefit what that processor was almost I hate to say exclusively designed for, but most efficiently designed for, which is gaming. So those are the main reasons for it. The other thing is probably wondering, why aren't we putting it on like every single SKU that's out there? It's cutting edge technology. We're starting here. We want to see how well it's adopted. And if it's adopted and people love it and they see the value in it, then we'll probably deploy it further. But new stuff is hard, to be very honest. It's really hard. And this is really new. And there's a reason so many people are excited about it, and it's so disruptive to the industry. And, this is where we're starting with it.
Yeah. I want to jump in on that because that's an interesting, Chris, I don't know if you can put that slide up, but the performance comparison versus 12900K, to me, this seems like sound strategy on your part. You have a new competitor product offering in this gaming segment, this price point area, and you guys stepped out to one up them. That makes sense. Also, it's probably one of your most popular SKUs for gamers, as you noted, the 5800X itself. And yes, the technology is expensive. I would offer that you're probably going to have just this, and Marco and I have talked through this over the last couple of days because it's exciting stuff. We would offer that you're going to have some serious demand for this chip, and the 5950X, your higher end SKUs, which also can support it from a price point standpoint, I would think, would be also a great fit for folks that are doing game streaming and a lot of context switching and multitasking while they game. Especially, I would think you'd get some interest there, right, Marco?
Yeah, absolutely. We I had a bunch of good questions come in, and this could take up a ton of time, but there's a couple of things we should probably ask. So I'm going to pop this one up here first. Ozzy's asking why the Vcache enabled 5800X3 has slightly lower clocks. Do you have any information that you can give us in regard that? I have thoughts on this, but before I spew them, I figured to give you a chance to answer.
But go for it.
Yeah. I would defer that to Robert Halleck, the expert in this area. Look, you're putting more things on a die. You're putting more things on a chip. Something's got to give, right? Nothing's free. And nothing's free from not just dollars. I mean, from a thermal, from a power perspective, and so on. And we're within 105 watts, right? So, the performance uplift that the Vcache is providing is significantly outweighs the frequency. And again, something's got to give. So, that's the high level explanation I can give you, but hit up Robert on Twitter and, he'll tech geek you out with all the details.
Yeah. So just quickly, Ozzy. So the compute die is basically radiating heat up through the Vcache. So AMD has to be cognizant of that. But something else to consider with the slightly lower peak clocks, that will probably mean higher sustained clocks, not quite at the peak, but a higher sustained clock. And that's why you see that strong performance. It's not really dropping off a cliff. You have all this extra cache and it's still able to maintain relatively high clocks, if not as high as the non-Vcache chip. But we can move on because we don't really have a solid confirmation there. And so this one, I'm fairly certain that Frank's not going to answer, but I'm going to ask, and then we'll give you thoughts after as well. We have David asking, will AM5 CPUs come with 3D Vcache?
Come on, Frank, tell us it all, baby.
By the way, going back to the 5800X 3D, it is still overclockable, right? So just something to keep in mind. I plead the fifth on this question?
Okay. Yes, you can.
I can't, guys. Trust me. I hate holding things back, but PR folks.
Anything could happen, and you would think that 3D memory stacking, which is a process and packaging technology, could be applied to a lot of different things. But that's just our speculation.
Here's what I would tell you as a marketer. Okay, here's what I would tell you as a marketer. The answer to that question largely lies in our customers. If the 5800 X3D is rapidly adopted and people appreciate it and there's demand for it, we're in the business of catering to demand. So that answer is going to depend on the market, to be very honest.
There you go. Good one. Yeah. Thank you, Frank.
So we have the Tech Potato Ian here. How many 6500 XTs should he weld together to beat a 3090? The answer is 9.
I recommend soldering. Instead of welding. But let me know how the welding goes, and if you can get it to work, I may buy one of those.
Arc welders don't hurt printed circuit boards at all. No,
no, not at all. So we should move on to what you can talk about socket AM5 and Zen 4. So Dr. Sue and you guys, gave an update on where Zen 4 is, and that you showed off socket AM5, and that socket AM5 is coming. Now we know, so everybody watching, there's no way we're going to get specific product information right now. It's not announced. We've already asked a couple of questions, and we can't put Frank on the spot for everything like that. But Frank, what can you tell us about why now's the time to switch to a new socket? And what's the overall health of Zen 4? As we head into this new year, we still have another half a year likely before we see product. Just give us some color on why now's the time to talk about AM5 and why now you guys are making the switch.
Look, I think when you look at what we've accomplished with AM4, it's unprecedented for any other company other than AMD. We have remained on the AM4 socket for 3 generations, maybe more than that. 4? How many generations now? I'm quizzing you, Marco.
So Ryzen 1000, 2000, 3000, 5000. Yeah.
4 or 5 generations here. That's 5 or 6 years roughly. It's remarkable. There's no other x86 PC platform that has accomplished that. To do that, it requires an enormous amount of planning and compromise, and it's an incredible effort as I watch the client team doing this internally. And it's a commitment that they've made and that they're continuing to make. But you get to a point where it's just not scalable anymore. And if you try to jam something into a socket that you planned 7 years ago, right? Because we have to plan this stuff 2+ years before you ever see it. You would just end up being uncompetitive. So what AM5 gives us is the ability to put not just everything you're going to see in Zen 4, as it's already been teased, what you've already seen so far, but it's going to give us the ability to put future generations in there as well. So, why go to AM5? Well, look, if you are sitting on a Ryzen 1000 or a 2000 or even a 3000 processor, and you're thinking about maybe moving to, a 5000 or even to a 3D Vcache one, we're putting this out there so that you can understand that, hey, something else is coming in a few quarters, right? I think we said second half of this year. That should be welcomed as, hey guys, thanks for giving us the heads up. Instead of not telling me anything, I go in and I buy into something, with an AM4, and then 6 months later it's potentially outdated or obsolete. So the fact that we share this information is because we're really trying to do right, as well as showing off our goodies, of course, and that we're making progress on our roadmap. That's the reason for AM5. AM4 is a 7-year-old socket now, if not older than that. And for everything we have planned for the next 7 years, if you want to call it that, or 5 years, you can't deliver all of that in the AM4 socket. And for that reason, we have to go to AM5. It's going to be what's essential to enable all the technology innovation that we have planned for you over the next 5 years.
Yeah, when you talk about DDR5, when you talk about PCI Express 5, that's a lot of different new interfaces that you need to incorporate, and to squeeze that into an old socket.
But Dave, that's
physics.
That's just in the next couple of years,
right?
I mean, we're looking at things 3-4+ years from now, and I can't give you a commitment on the longevity of the socket. Please, I'm not giving anybody a commitment. All I'm telling you is you get to a point where you hit a brick wall as to how far you can go, and AM4 is amazing. It's amazing how far we've been able to bring it, and there's going to be a transition point. And what I'll tell folks is just zoom out, maintain perspective, right? You got a socket for 4 or 5 years. We will hopefully be able to accomplish something similar with AM5, hopefully, not a commitment. Nobody else offers you that. I mean, the other guys give you a socket for like a year, maybe 2 years, right? So the total cost of ownership of AM4 and AM5, there's just nothing that compares to it. And transitions are always tough. We understand that, but I hope people can maintain perspective and appreciate what we're accomplishing here.
You make a very good point with respect to TCO, and that's something that, on the consumer side, we don't perhaps always consider, but it's something that rings very true on the enterprise and commercial side. But TCO is a big deal. How long can you maintain your system, and how much does it cost to maintain it over those years?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as somebody pointed out in the comments, we applaud you for that TCO benefit for sure. Good stuff.
Yep. And the other thing with socket AM4, it's over and above IO. AMD could have pushed platform performance higher if they could have gotten more power through socket AM4. So, it's the time is now with all the new IO and wanting to have more flexibility with power to have a fresh socket. So it is what it is.
Yep. And look at the bright side. When AM5's out, you'll be able to buy all those AM4 CPUs for a really good price.
There you go. So before we probably have to wrap really soon, but I'm going to toss a softball your way. We've sort of seen Intel has shown their hand for the most part with their latest architectures. You guys obviously know how healthy Zen 4 is at this point in time. Where do you see AMD's position a year from now? You guys you're going full bore with Zen 4. Where are you relative to competition in a year?
Look, the answer to that question is not one I can give you directly and tell you the exact answer to. But I think if you look at our history, the future, it's fairly predictable. We have been very consistent in our execution over the last 3+ years. We come out, we say we're going to do something, and we do it. And the fact that we're sharing Zen 4, we wouldn't share it unless it was healthy. We wouldn't give you a time frame unless it was healthy. And I think that, you can depend on AMD in the future as you've been able to look at what we've executed recently. And it's pretty much clockwork. And it's not easy by any means. The teams that execute this work are remarkable. But we've been pretty consistent. We've had a new desktop CPU, almost every single year, almost in around the same time frame. We've had a new mobile CPU pretty much every year, just in around the same time frame, give or take some weeks here and there. So that's what you should be counting on moving forward, is that our execution will continue to be, as reliable as it's been up to now.
Good stuff.
Understood.
Good question, Marco, by the way.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah, it's all hopeful, but if
you don't know what you don't know. There's always unexpected things that could occur, right? So past results are not indicative of future performance or however it goes. But
there you go.
We're certainly, that's our plan. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're striving for. And the teams here are pretty remarkable in pulling off the things that they're able to pull off. So I'm very confident in our future.
If I was a betting man, I'd place some bets on you.
Don't start talking about bets, Dave. Not with me here.
Sorry. Another sensitive subject. Well, Frank, it's been a pleasure. I'm gonna drop something in real quick, just to let folks know what's going on at Hot Hardware right now before we let you go. But folks, we have a CES 2022 giveaway promotion with our friends at Lenovo. The CES 2022 New Year, New Gear giveaway. Hit that link and a few social actions, and you could get in to win some pretty cool laptop prizes. And all over the web. You can find us at hothardware.com, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com/hothardware. Frank Azor from AMD. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you for being so frank. Frank, we appreciate the candor.
Can that make its way into my next intro? Because I'm jealous of Marco's intro right now. Effervescent, yeah. I need some words to describe me.
There you go. We'll work on the superlatives, because you're a good friend, and it's always a pleasure catching up with you. And we very much appreciate your time. We know you're a busy guy. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. Always a pleasure. Thank you guys for always giving us a stage when we have some new stuff to talk about. So we really appreciate you and your audience checking in with us and asking the tough questions that they do. It's the hardest thing for me is to not answer them. Trust me. I do try to live up to my name, Dave. I like to be frank, but keep them coming. You know, maybe one day I'll screw up and I'll review something I'm not supposed to.
We don't want to do that. We don't want to get anybody fired. We want you to stay right where you are.
It's all
Thanks
good.
again. Thanks
guys.
again, Frank Azor, Chief Gaming Architect from AMD. It's a pleasure. And keep those technologies coming, because we're looking forward to all the products coming this year in 2022 from you guys. Good stuff. Frank Azor from AMD. And everybody, thanks for joining us today in the audience, the chat. We appreciate it. Stop by hothardware.com, where you can find us on the web, twitter.com/hothardware, youtube.com/hothardware. Hit thumbs up, subscribe, please. Would appreciate it. And you'll get notified when we go live again with the 2.5 Geeks webcast, which is typically Wednesdays at 5:30. Coming up later this evening as well, you'll hear from Val Rojas on Hot Hardware Twitch at around 7 p.m., I believe, is when she's kicking off tonight for some live game streaming action. And in the meantime, thank you again, Frank. You're a gentleman and a scholar. And thanks everybody for joining us.
One last quick thing before we slam close. We didn't get to talk about the new mobile Radeon. So if you have questions, drop them in the comments. And if we can follow up with Frank, we will.
Point.
We just ran out of time. Thanks,
and
everybody.
With that, well, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks, guys.